Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing story coming to us from the US. We have Byron W. Lacy on board today. Byron was born in Burnett, Texas on March 21st, 1950. He is a fourth-generation Texan. Byron's great-grandfather, George W. Lacy, came to Texas in the early 1850s. George and two of his business partners donated the granite to build the current Texas state capitol. He also started a dog breed, which is now called the Blue Lacy, and is the state dog of Texas. Byron incorporates stories of his ancestors in his books. He started writing poetry while in high school and received great encouragement from his teachers. His first poem was published in a small literary magazine before he turned 21. He has had many poems published in literary magazines. He also published a book of poetry, The Night is a Constant Lover, and a sci-fi novel, Heroes and Villains, Down the Halls of Time, The Legend of Spiny Weezer, both available on Amazon. Byron has written a non-fiction book about his experiences titled Chosen, Chronicles of an Alien Abductee, also available on Amazon. Byron is also a musician and writes and performs EDM electronic dance music on synthesizers, and has had 2 CD collections of music on Amazon. In 1976, Byron received a Bachelor of Science in English. In 1977, he received a Master of Arts in Graphic Art, and in 1978, a M.F.A. in Graphic Art. Byron has had paintings and sculptures exhibited in galleries and museums throughout the United States. Byron still resides in Texas, where he spends his time writing, creating sculptures and paintings, studying psychology, metaphysics, researching alien abductions, and helping abductees. So, Byron, thank you so much for coming on, sir.
Thank you for having me.
So, Byron, you've got a pretty amazing story. So let's get to it. Let's start from the beginning. So you were born in 1950, and did anything of consequence happen to you as a kid?
Well, in 1952, I had cancer, and it was a sarcoma. First off, in 1951, I started getting sick, and I quit developing the stages of development, and I couldn't sit up and things like that. And they started taking me to this little country doctor. He couldn't figure out what was wrong, and he took me to a doctor, and they eventually, after a year, they sent me to a doctor in Austin, a specialist urologist. And Dad has always told me that when the doctor came down from the upper floors with me in his arms, he was as white as his coat. And he told them that I had cancer and they were going to operate on me next week. And he also told them that the chances of me living very long were slim because nobody lived from a sarcoma at that time, and that they should work on having another baby so it would lessen the blow when I died. And I fooled them.
What happened?
I lived.
Did it
So they
disappear on
operated
its
on me.
own?
No, they took it, they operated on me the next week, but I never had another recurrence. And usually when you have a malignant tumor or cancer, it will recur even if they can fix it. But mine never came back.
Thank God. Wow. Okay, so what happened after that? I think there's you've got a pretty interesting story regarding Captain Hook.
Yes, now I didn't know about the aliens. I didn't even know aliens. I didn't know what they were. And in 1956, my mom took me to the bedroom. She'd always take me and tuck me in. Well, one night she took me to the bedroom, put me in the bed, and she left the room and turned out the light. And I asked her to leave the hall light on. And when I turned around to lay down, there were 3 little guys sitting at the foot of my bed, standing at the foot of my bed on the side. And I screamed for Mama to come in there because I didn't know how people would be getting in my room, even if they were short. And she came in and they were gone, and she just tucked me in and said, "Go to sleep," and left. She didn't tell me it was a dream. She actually didn't say anything about them at all. And the next night, the exact same thing happened. Totally the same thing. She acted the same way. The third night she came in, because they were there again. And she said, she sat down on the edge of the bed and she said, son, if they come back in here, I don't want you to call me because they're not going to be here when I come in. So you're just going to have to learn to deal with them yourself. And then she took me in and left. And when I turned around, there they were. Plus, there was a very tall, he looked like Captain Hook. He had a wide Captain pirate hat on and a vest, or he seemed to. And he was almost as tall as the ceiling. And he danced around sort of weird. And all of a sudden, I could not move. And the room seemed to get bigger and the bed started rotating, or it felt like it to me. It started rotating, it seemed like it did. And they were like they were stuck to the bed. They were rotating with it. This went on for a few minutes. And I was about to get really freaked out and start screaming or something when everything was gone. The room was normal. They were gone. And I lay back down and tucked my head under my pillow and under the blanket and went to sleep. And I did that every night after that because if they came back, I just didn't want to see them.
So the only pirates that were in the room were the actual tall gray, let's say, and you had smaller grays all about.
I think he was a mantis.
A mantis.
And I think that his big hat was actually his head. They were making me see it as a hat. And I think that because after 2009, I had contact with the mantis. Then I had psychic contact with the same voice. And actually, I'd heard that voice before 2009. And that's why I think it was a mantis. And I think it was him, the same one. It's like he's been with me my whole life or from time to time.
Wow. Do you see him as a guardian of sorts or
Well, they've saved my life 9 times.
yeah.
So, yeah, they're sort of a guardian.
Yeah.
They probably hate it every time I get in the car.
Okay, so did they come back a lot as a child? But before we get into that, did your mom know about the ETs?
Now, at this time, I didn't know, but something happened in 1961 that suddenly made me totally believe. Well, I didn't believe it in 61. I thought it was weird that, shall I tell you what happened? In 1961, one night, I was going to bed, and this song, Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavor on the Bedpost Overnight, had just hit America from England. And it was playing on the radio, and I listened to the radio a lot. And this song stuck in my head one night, and I couldn't go to sleep the whole night long. This song just played over and over and over. And mom came in and goes, okay, you need to get up so we can eat breakfast and go to school. And she left, and I went into the kitchen after I got dressed, and I said, I can't go to school. I didn't sleep at all last night. And I told her what happened, and she just looked at me. And I said, what was that? And she said, I don't know. And she put me on the sofa with a soft drink, Coca-Cola, and watching TV. And she said, you do not fall asleep. You're going to sleep tonight because you're going to school tomorrow. Then she went back into the dining room and she got the telephone off the wall, the hand part, and she stepped into the kitchen and called somebody, which turned out to be my father. Well, around 5 o'clock, Dad got home and he walked in and he just walked right past me. I was on the sofa and he got my mother and they went in the kitchen. Then he came out and he sat down on the sofa with me and he said, son, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to have to take you to a psychiatrist. Now, in 1961, a psychiatrist was a bad thing. You know, it was just bad. And you didn't want to go to a psychiatrist. It would stigmatize you forever and all this stuff. So I didn't know what he was talking about. I mean, the song had just played in my head all night long. And then he said, in the late 1800s, a female ancestor of yours told people she had seen little men they came in her room and she talked to them. Now, I didn't even think about the little men in El Paso when I was 6. And he said, plus they didn't talk to me. He said, they put her in an insane asylum and she eventually died there. And you don't want that to happen to you. We don't talk about ourselves. We Lacys don't talk about ourselves. In fact, the only thing I know about my parents is what happened to them when I was with them. And you don't want to be famous. You don't want to talk to people about yourself. And you don't want to tell anybody about this. And that was it. And I'm sitting there going, what? Now, after I realized I was abducted, I did a list of everything strange that had ever happened to me. And every time I'd write something down, I'd go, wow, it's aliens. And then I went, he remembered what happened to me in 1956. He remembered the little men. And that's why he said that. You see, when I was about 8, I found that I was forgetting things that had happened to me. So I started going over stuff before bed every night, things that had happened to me all my life. And those little men came up, but I didn't know what they were. Still, I remembered them. And I wouldn't think of them all the time, but I would usually think of them in the night when I get ready to go to bed. I would remember them. That's one reason I kept them in my mind, because I didn't want to forget my life, because I knew people forgot things. I was riding home on a bicycle, me and a bunch of kids, and we were in a line on the side of the road. And I suddenly noticed to my left that this car had left the center line, had left the lane and was coming over the center stripe and was heading right for me. And I mean, I didn't have time to think. I didn't know what to do. I didn't stop. I didn't speed up. But then I was on the ground and I was rolling head over heels. And each time I'd come up, or heels over head, each time I'd come up, I'd see the ground, the tire, the bumper right in front of my face, the light, the sky. And that did that 3 times. And then my body, and I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything, which is good. I probably would have died if I had moved. And suddenly my body, all on its own, it straightened up and I flew through the air, and I flew between the top 2 wires of a barbed wire fence. And I got one small scratch on my arm. It's about 1 inch long. That was the only injury. Went through those 2 wires. You know, they're only about 1 foot apart. I went through those 2 wires, and then I landed on the ground, and there was a lot of grass, and I was safe. And this policeman that was the crossing guard, he came running up, and he made me lay down. He wouldn't let me sit up. And I said, well, I'm fine. And he said, no, you don't sit up. He said, you could have injuries you don't know about. And I said, well, I'm fine. And I said, but I can't find my glasses. So they were right next to me, and he found them and gave them to me. And he said, I've called the ambulance and they're going to be here in a minute. So the ambulance got there, they put me in, they took me to my parents' house, which wasn't far from there, to our house, picked up my mother, my dad was at work, and carried me to Kaufman to the hospital. And Dad showed up at the hospital a little later. He got off work. Well, they checked me out and I was fine. They gave me a tetanus shot because of the barbed wire, and they wanted to put me in the hospital so they could observe me. They said that sometimes you could have an injury that doesn't show up right off. And I had been hit by my teacher's husband. So I passed that year, but he had hit me. Well, my parents came in the next day, and the teacher had been there to visit me, and she had brought me a pot of tulips and some divinity candy, which I'd never had before, and it was great. And my parents said that, well, they bought you a new bicycle. I said, new bicycle? I said, I've got my own bicycle. I don't need a new one. They said, well, they got you a new one. I said, but there's nothing wrong with it. They said, well, just wait till we get home. And So then a little after lunch, they let me go home. The doctor checked me out again, said I was fine, let me go home. And we got home, and there was the new bicycle sitting on the front porch, and it was an American Flyer, red and white, with the gas tank, the light, the bumper rider for somebody, the streamers. And I was really excited about that, but I still wanted my old bicycle. I said, well, now I've got two bikes. And Dad said, come with me. So we walked around to the carport, and there was my bicycle leaning against the wall. Well, it was curved. If you were looking at down at it, it was curved like this, like a crescent moon. And the middle of it was where I had been sitting. And he laid it down on the ground, and it was about a foot and a half up from the ground to the seat, whereas the wheels were flat on the ground or on the concrete. So somehow I'd been hit directly where I was sitting, although I don't think I was there. I think they pulled me out off the bike and into another dimension or something when the impact happened, and then put me back on the ground. Well, but I didn't know that at the time. Everybody said that I was really lucky and that God had saved me, or my guardian angels had saved me, or God really had a purpose for me, all this stuff, you know. And my father, he said, well, you were really lucky. And I could tell he was confused or dazed or something. He was acting a little bit strange. Of course, he may have known what it was, but he didn't tell me.
Wow.
So that was the next big event that happened.
Okay. So that's when well, how long after did the UFO thing happen?
The UFO that I saw, well, I saw one in the 1970s. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It did happen. It was that year. It was 1961.
1961.
Duh, yeah, and it was cigar shaped. It was huge. And I was taking chorus because I didn't want to take gym or PE when I got into high school. I just did not want to mess with that. And so I was going to be in the band. That was my plan. Because if you were in the band, you didn't have to be in PE. Well, anyway, our teacher was sick one day, Mr. Cathy. And there was this girl, well, she was probably 19 or 20, maybe 21. She was really pretty. And she was substituting. I'd never seen her before. And Seagoville was a pretty small town, but I'd never seen her, not in the grocery store or anywhere. Well, it was the end of winter, and she said, well, it's so pretty, we're going to go outside today, which we all were going, She said, we're going to do calisthenics, and we were even less in favor of that. So we went outside the building, and it was warm, and she stood under this huge oak tree, and we were out in the sun on this gravel. And she had us line up and stretch our arms out and touch fingertips and then move away from each other a little bit. And then we were going to do side straddle hops, and she would count. So we started doing the side straddle hops, and we did 6 or 7. And then the bell rang. No, wait. We did 6 or 7, and then this thing appeared above the tree that she was standing under. It looked like a George Washington class nuclear submarine. And I put together models at that time, so I knew what that looked like. And it looked like it was flipped upside down, it was removed, and the battle deck of the USS Missouri was attached to it, only it didn't have guns. What would be guns to us were, it looked like runes, like on the very first Star Cruiser that goes across in Star Wars at the beginning of that movie, all those little rooms under there. Of course, that was a long time later. Well, anyway, it looked like it had all these rooms, and it came across, and we all just stopped, and we were staring up at it like we were in a trance or something. And she goes, Okay, okay, that was nothing. Now let's get back to work. So we started doing side straddle hops and the bell rang. Now it was an hour class. We weren't outside but about 15 or 20 minutes, or it seemed that way to us because we only did 7 or 8 side straddle hops. And so she said, okay, y'all can go now. So we left, never saw her again. And I think she was either an alien in disguise or a hybrid that was working with them because of the fact that she didn't look. How much she know it was nothing? She didn't even look up. She knew it was going to happen. It was obvious, but not to us at the time. Now, I ended up not talking to anybody about it, and nobody talked to me about it. But a couple of years ago, I mentioned this on a chat channel on, an abductees channel. Well, anyway, I mentioned it on Facebook. And this girl that went to school with me then said, hey, now I didn't see it. In fact, I had pneumonia that week and I was at home, but some of my friends told me about it. They told me just what you told me, what you wrote.
So you
And
got
I had asked,
corroboration.
yes, from her.
Okay. Wow. Dude, how big was it?
Uh, it was as big as the battleship Texas. It was
Huge.
as big as a battleship. And we just saw the nose of it. It was like it came right above the tree and stopped. It was sticking out just a little bit where we could actually see the buildings and stuff underneath. And a couple years later, because I've told this story a lot on Facebook and every place, this woman got me on a private messenger and she said her boyfriend had told her about a ship that looked exactly the same way, a UFO.
Wow.
So
Cool.
that was the second time that it was corroborated.
Yeah.
Corroborated. Now, two things happened before 1969 was over. Two things happened. One of them was in about 1967 or 68. Me and two friends were going fishing, and I had a driver's license and a Volkswagen, and my dad let me drive. So I was taking us to Lake Tawakoni. uh, I had this feeling that I had missed the turnoff for it, and I kept asking them, and they said no. But then they giggled, and I went, "Oh, they're lying to me." So I said, "I know you're lying. I'm going to turn around." So I checked the mirror; it was clear. I put the blinker on. There was a white van quite a ways back. Put the blinker on, and I moved into the middle lane. And me and my friends have talked about this since it happened too, because we can't figure out why it happened. It shouldn't have, except the guy was an idiot. We I started turning in. I'd put on my blinkers, I'd put on my light, and I had no air conditioning. I always rode with my elbow out the window. I pulled my elbow in and I looked at the mirror, and the mirror exploded and everything turned white. And then there was this extreme grinding sound. And I let go of the gas pedal and everything, and the car and the van passed us. He had, for some reason, instead of passing us on the left, on the right, which would have been logical, he had decided to go across and go into the oncoming traffic, although there was none, and pass me there, and it hit the van. Well, if I hadn't put my arm in, I would have lost it, and I probably would have bled to death. So that was either very lucky or something made me put my arm in. We're not sure, but we all thought that we sure missed a close call somehow, or at least I did. Then in 19, in about 60, it's either 67 or 68, I don't remember exactly. All the dates are correct in the book except the very first date. I had it happen in 55 and it actually happened in 56. Well, in 67 or 68, a friend of mine and I were going to the Trinity River. We always went to the East Fork, excuse me, a lot. And it was dark and it was windy and it was getting ready to rain, but we didn't care. We wanted to get out of the house. I mean, you couldn't see off the road. And we went to the Trinity River, and the wind was so hard and it was misting that we decided not to get out. So we were going to go on past. When you're down in the floodplain on the Trinity River, then you go up a levee and back down, and it goes down a little further. But then there are these hills along the side of the road, and the road we were on was getting ready to curve around one of the hills. I like to drive fast. I don't, well, I did speed sign, but mostly I drove the speed limit, which was 70 miles an hour at that time. So we were going 70, and we were getting ready to go around that hill at 70 miles an hour and my father told me he had put 4 new tires on the car that day. So he was going to let me go out because it would be safe. The back tire on my side blew just as we were getting to that hill. So we had to pull over to the side of the road, and we had to change the tire. And I didn't have a flashlight, and we had to use a cigarette lighter, so my friend couldn't help me. And the wheels on a Volkswagen, they don't have nuts that come out and you stick the tire on. They have holes. The nut is on the bolt, and you have to screw it in. So I had to hold that up, find the hole with my finger, while my friend's trying to give me flesh with a cigarette lighter. And so we got the tire changed. We got up, got back in the car. We decided to go ahead and go forward. We got up to about 45 miles an hour when we went around that hill. And there were cows everywhere, all over the road, on both sides of the road. There were at least 20 cattle, maybe more, out there. So we stopped. If we had been going 70 miles an hour, we would have plowed right into them. And in a Volkswagen, the one we hit would have been in the car with us. So we went real slow and went through them. And then we went on for a while, and when we came back, they were gone.
Wow. It disappeared.
And yeah, well, probably the farmer got them and put them back in the pen. Somebody probably told him they were out. You know, they do that kind of stuff. But if that brand new tire hadn't blown, I wouldn't be here anymore. Then in 1970, I was at Henderson County Junior College, and um, I played in the band. We played at pep rallies. We were playing at the homecoming pep rally, and we had a cannon that they set off to end pep rallies every day. Well, anyway, so we finished playing, and we were just standing around talking, and I was talking to this guy standing in front of me that I barely knew, when somebody tapped me on my left shoulder. And I turned around to look at him, and I was getting ready to ask him what the hell he was doing, interrupting me when I was talking to a friend, and I don't even know you, when the cannon went off. And I felt air rush past my back, right above my belt, because my shirt was up a little bit, right across my back. And I saw the guy that I'd been talking to crumble to the ground. And a crowd of people gathered around him, and there was dust in the air. Some chunks of a brick blew out. The cannon had exploded. In their zeal for it being homecoming, they'd put a double load of powder and a double wadding. If they had not put a double wadding, it would have been okay. It would have just been loud. When they did, it caused the back of the cannon, which was facing away from all of us, caused the back of the cannon to explode. And they found a piece of the cannon over a couple of buildings over in the football field later that day. And this guy had taken the piece of shrapnel that went past my back. He had taken it in his pelvic bone, and he was in the hospital and in rehab for a year. I would have caught it right at the base of my spine, and that would have been it for me. Um, And I turned back around to tell that guy, hey, I think you saved my life. And he was gone. Never saw him again. And Henderson County was a small junior college, and you would usually see everybody, even if you didn't know him. Never saw him again. And he never came up to me and say, hey, what happened or anything. He was just gone. One other interesting thing, the next year, my roommate tried to commit suicide by taking a bunch of pills. I went into the room and he was covered up with blankets. And I mean, it's like September, hot as can be in Texas. And he had the heater on. And I go, what did you do? Try to kill yourself? And he jokingly, he said, yeah. And I thought he was kidding and I left. Well, then I came back about 20 or 30 minutes later and it was even worse. And I went and got the dorm father. It turned out he'd taken all the pills in the two suites and they moved him out. Well, no, they didn't. They took him and pumped his stomach. And then a week later, he joined the army to go to Vietnam. He wanted to go to Vietnam. He wanted to be killed, really, is what he wanted. So I took him to Tyler and he joined the army. And they told me my draft number was something like 324 and I would never be drafted, which was a big relief to me because I didn't want to go in the army. I didn't want to kill anybody. And I didn't want to be killed. Well, there was nobody to move in the room. It was two suites with a bathroom in between. And the dorm father came up and he said, look, we got a special situation here. Our rules and regulations say that there cannot be one person to a room, but we don't have anybody that wants in your room. And so we were going to make you move out, but the dean has decided that it would be better to at least have one person's money than none at all for this room. So we're going to let you stay. And if anybody does come along and want a room, then they'll move in with you. I said, okay. I had the room all to myself for a year. The only person that's ever had a room to themselves. And I think they did that. I think they did it. They kept people out of it. And that way they could get me easily, even though I didn't know they were getting me.
How do you feel about that? Being taken all the time?
Well, at first I freaked out. After I made this whole list, well, before I made the list, I freaked out. But after I made the list, I was still freaking out because I knew they were taking me all the time. I knew there was nothing I could do about it. A friend said, you could be welded into an iron box and they could get you. There's nothing you can do. And I've got an electric line that runs behind my house. This was 2009. And I got to thinking about it and I go, well, obviously, and I had done some of the list. I'm going, obviously they know everything I do and probably everything I'm thinking because he had taught me about implants. He was crazy about aliens, but I wasn't. I didn't care one way or the other. So he told me a lot of stuff. He told me that I had most likely had implants. They could hear me. And I figured out they can hear me. They can see what I see, everything. So I thought, okay, they can hear me. That means I can talk to them. And I'm going to bug the crap out of them until they show themselves to me and let me know what they're doing. And I went out behind the house under the electric line and just walked back and forth into the woods. And I said, I'm going to do this every day until I die. So you're going to tell me. I boiled it down finally to, I want to know what you're doing to me. I want to know if you're taking me. I want to know if I'm crazy. And I said that over and over and over. And I did it for 3 days, 6 hours a day. And that night, that third day was Friday night, and I played at a restaurant, played country music, my first gig since high school. So I went up there and I screwed up. I forgot the words. I ended up making up words to songs, and everybody knew the words. But at the break, this guy comes out of the audience. He goes, "Look, I play guitar. You're going to give me your guitar, and you take your song words and you use those, and I'll play guitar for you, and you sing, and we'll finish your set." He became a good friend of mine and taught me to play bass guitar and to play in some bands with him a little bit. Well, anyway, the last song I played was "Hey Mr. Spaceman" by the Byrds, because it's sort of country sounding, but it's not a country song, and I always liked it. So I played that, and a friend had come with me to help me load and unload the band, my stuff, my equipment. I was the band. So we loaded up my trailer and I drove home. And it was about 11, and I got in bed because I was used to going to bed at 10 o'clock, and I couldn't go to sleep. So I put on this meditation tape. Um, it's called Zygon. I can't remember the name, but the guy that does it, he has a site now, and he does meditations, entrainment CDs. This had an entrainment that puts you into a deep mental state. And so I was listening to it, and then all of a sudden, I couldn't tell that I was breathing. And that sort of freaked me out a little bit. And I took a deep breath and I could breathe again. So I was glad, and I thought, okay, well, I'm cool. And then the breathing went away, then my heartbeat went away, and then the phosphenes, those little dots of light you see when you close your eyes, they were gone. I had no feelings of my body at all, nothing. And then I was in a hammock, and the hammock was hung from side to side instead of end to end. It was a hammock, and it was not cloth. I don't know what it was. And it came all the way down from the ceiling in some room. I wasn't in my bedroom. And there were blankets in there with me. There were 3 or 4 of them, and I know one of them was a child's blanket. The light was dim, but I could see a pattern. And I grabbed hold to the end of the hammock and pulled myself out. And I didn't have any clothes on, just like when I'd gone to bed, and I didn't have any shoes on. Excuse me. But it was warm in the room, and I'm going, it's awfully hazy. And then I reached for my glasses to clean them, and I'm not wearing my glasses. I was in exactly the same state that I was when I was in bed. So suddenly I go, oh my God, I'm on an alien spaceship. And I got very elated. And then I heard a noise because there was an open door, but it didn't have a closing door. It was a hole in the wall, a perfectly square hole. So it was a door. And I heard something on the other side, and I go, oh my God. I said something else, but I'm not going to say it on the air. I said, I don't think I'm ready to see aliens. Then everything dipped to black, like in a movie, fade to black. And then it came back up, and I was laying on a metal table. And there were 3 grays standing, or the 3 little men that had been there in 56 were standing at the very side at the end of that table. And over to the side, there was this 7 foot tall, it looked like a praying mantis wearing a robe. And he was standing there. It wasn't Captain Hook. And then somehow I was in my bed, and I was in that room at the same time. And it was not long after that I got in touch with Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, who's been on TV and stuff, and he's an investigator. And he told me they can make you perceive whatever they want to make you perceive. They can make you perceive from a different place than where you are. He said, so what happened to me was perfectly normal. And I could see myself on the table. They put well, first, it turned into black and white, or grayscale, like a black and white movie. And then it zoomed in, and it showed me from my knees to my neck. But it was me laying there, and it wasn't a movie. I was 3D. And then it turned into X-ray. Now I couldn't see the grays because they were out of the picture and the guy was out of the picture, but I could see me, and they did the anal probe, and then I was back in my bed and everything was gone. Oh, before that, when I was in the bed, I started to freak out, and the tall being, I could tell it was him. He thought at me, "Do not be afraid." And instantly I was calm. It was not like his telling me made me calm. It was like he commanded my nervous system to be calm. And then all that stuff happened. Well, I thought, well, this is really weird. And I grabbed a sheet of paper and I drew the tall being. I didn't call him a mantis at that point. You've seen the picture. And I put it by the bedside and I went to sleep. That's unusual that I just went to sleep right after something like this happening. It's hard for me to go to sleep when nothing happens. And the next morning I woke up and I picked up that piece of paper and then I set it down. No, the first thing I went, wow, they really are taking me. And I was really on a spaceship. And then I started crying and I couldn't stop crying, except I didn't feel sad. I couldn't figure out why I was crying. And I thought maybe it's something subconscious. I don't know. But I cried. I cried for about 30 minutes and I tried to stop and I had no control over it. Then after that, it was like a great relief. Well, the next day, that evening, me and a friend of mine, the one that was the UFO researcher, we went for a walk because we walked every day for our health down at the creek. We went for a walk. There was something that happened before this that I haven't told, but I'll tell in a minute. We went for a walk and we got back to the house and I told him what happened while we were on the walk. And he said, well, you're an abductee, like I've told you. And I said, well, look, I said, I've got this. And I pulled out the drawing and I said, see, this will prove that it's not real because I've got this picture. There's no way this thing could exist. So he looked at it and he turned around to the computer and he typed in an address that he remembered. And there it was, a drawing by a kid that looked exactly like my drawing. He said, this is the mantis creature. So that blew that out of the water, and I knew it really happened. What I forgot to tell you was before this happened, I was driving home from dinner, and I was stopped at a light in front of Walmart, stoplight, and I saw what looked like a plate made out of water floating at the end of the light, and then it expanded to about 6 or 7 feet up and down and across, and it was swirling. And it looked like the time gate or the Stargate in the movie with Kurt Russell, except it didn't have a frame around it. And I was looking at it and I looked at all the cars and nobody saw it, nobody paid attention. And then just as the light changed, it exploded. It didn't make any noise, but it just went choo. And before it hit the ground, any of it hit the ground, it disappeared. So I went home and I called my friend, who I call Frank in the book. That's not his name. I called him and told him about it, and he didn't say anything. A week later, on the exact same day, the same thing happened, and it was probably close to the same time. Well, I didn't say anything to him. The next day, while we were walking, as we were coming back to the house, I told him it happened again and everything. He didn't say anything. We got in the house, and he always had something to say. I said, look, what do you think this is? And he said, do you want to know? I said, yeah, I want to know. He said, are you sure you want to know? Because once I tell you, I can't untell you. And I said, well, yeah, I want to know. He said, I think you're an alien abductee. And I've thought it for quite some time, but now I'm certain you are. I said, you're crazy. And he turned around and he wrote down a bunch of websites and he said, you look at these when you get home. Then you tell me I'm crazy. So I took him home and I threw him on my desk. And after a week and him bugging me every day to look at him, I got home and I looked at him and I went, oh, damn. Not only am I an alien abductee, I've got PTSD because I didn't even know that existed, but there was a link to it. I didn't have it bad, but I've still got it. Now it's not so bad. And so that's how I found out I was an abductee. And that's when I went looking for Daryl's, for somebody to talk to. And I found, well, no. Then my friend said, about a week later, he goes, look, there's this thing you need to go to in the town that Elvis was in. I can't remember, Memphis, wherever Elvis was. He said, there's a meeting with Whitley Strieber, and you need to go to this. I think it'd be good for you. And I had actually found it that day, and I decided I wanted to go, which is unusual. I hate to travel. And so I went there and I got hypnotized by a woman that was in the group too, not a member of the presenters. I saw Linda Moulton, whatever her name is, and several other people, and Whitley. Well, anyway, she hypnotized me because she wanted to be a hypnotist. She'd been studying it. She was in college, and she wanted to help abductees, and she thought she herself was an abductee, and she probably was. But she hypnotized me to remember, and we focused on two events. One was the thing I saw at school, and in under hypnotism, they took us all, me and the whole class, up into the ship. It was a very long ship, and we walked through it. And there were some glass tubes with water bubbling up in them. There weren't any babies in them. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be later. And then they took us out. I didn't remember anything they did to us. Then in the next one, I had been at a summer camp in 69, 70, that or the summer of 69, and before college started. And one night, I went into the cabin to sleep. I was a counselor, and I laid down, and I couldn't sleep for a minute. I turned over, and the sun was coming up. It had taken me like 6 or 7 hours somehow to turn over. Well, in the hypnosis session, a ship landed out in the yard. They knew who I was, and they had everybody come out, and everybody was in sort of sleepwalking except for me. I was perfectly awake. And I asked them if they had abducted all these people because of me, and they said no, which may or may not have been the truth. And then they put me back in the bed, and I woke up, or I turned over.
Wow.
So that was interesting.
Byron, can you get into the Atman story, please?
Yes. Now, my wife and I were getting ready to start meditating. I was having a bad problem with nerves, real bad. And this guy was teaching transcendental meditation there. It was $25, which was a lot of money in 1971, but we decided it'd be worth it. Well, I sat down in my grandma's old rocking chair that we had, and I closed my eyes and I focused on nothing. And suddenly I fell through the rocking chair, through the floor of the house, and through the earth into just solid blackness. And my body wasn't there. And I saw a little figure that looked exactly like me, except it looked like it was carved out of something or molded out of flesh and blood. And it was just floating there. It was perfect. It didn't move. And it was about 3 or 4 inches tall, if I remember right. And then I was wide awake. And I told Barbara, I said, I don't think I need to go take meditation lessons. I think I know how. And I told her what had happened. And she said, well, you're going to go anyway because we've got the money. And she, the next day, unbeknownst to me, for a couple of days, she researched Middle Eastern religions. looking for something, looking for what had happened. And she found the description of the Atman, which it is like a blueprint, three-dimensional blueprint of what you will be when you're born, when you are an adult. I don't know if it goes through stages or not, but that's what I had seen. She found a description of it, and I knew nothing about it, and I'd never studied Middle Eastern religions or anything. I barely studied American religions. And then I went and did the meditation class, and sure enough, I had figured out, or I knew, I didn't figure it out, I just knew how to meditate. But it did help. It gave me a focus. We moved out here where I am now in about 76. Uh, and we were driving home. Now, one morning I got up and I had a huge bruise on my leg, and my wife goes, you can hurt yourself while you're in bed more than any person that I've ever heard of. And I go, yeah. And she goes, yeah, you have bruises. I see bruises on you all the time. And I know you haven't bruised yourself. We haven't been doing anything. I said, well, maybe I sleptwalked and bumped into the coffee table. She said, well, maybe. I doubt it. And we were driving home, and up from the road curves around and comes here, and then it comes straight down my road. You turn off. There was an egg or an egg shape floating above the tree line on the other side of a pasture, not even a mile away from us. And it was moving very purposefully. There was no wind, but it was moving very slowly. And I was going, Barbara, look at that. And she goes, what? I said, that giant egg above the trees. And she said, I don't see anything. And I finally I got out of the car and got around on her side, and I grabbed her head and I looked over the top of her head and I aimed her eyes at it. And she still couldn't see it. She didn't see anything. So that was one of the ships I saw. Then there was another event a year or two later that was very strange. There's no TV out here, and you can only get one channel. So we had joined a video club, and there was something that happened strange there too. In fact, I'll tell it first. We joined this video club, and they took our birthday and put it into the computer as our password. So they look up your birthday. One day I go in, and this girl goes, well, I need your social security number. And I said, well, why? It's under my birthday. And she goes, I know, but we're changing the system over. I said, well, I don't want it changed. She goes, well, I understand, and I'm sorry, but I have to change it. So I gave her my social security number, and she put that in and got my birth date out of there. So we took the movie in each day and got a new one. You could have one movie a day for free for a monthly fee. So we got one every day. So I took it in and I told her my social security number. It was a different girl. And she typed it in and she goes, well, it's not in the system. And she typed it again. And then she goes, well, and I said, well, they changed it yesterday. She said, well, what's your birthday? So I told her and she typed it in. And she goes, oh, you're Byron Lacy. So that happened that day. And then it happened the next day. And then the fourth day I go up there and the manager's there. And he goes, we've been trying to change your password over to your social security number. And we've tried several times today, but it won't change. So we're going to just leave it your birthday, and you'll be the only person whose birthday gets them to their account. Well, a year later, this guy insisted on changing it. And I went, sure. And I didn't care. And he changed it and it stuck. But for a year, I had my birthday, and I was convinced that somehow psychically I had caused this. And after I found out about the aliens, I knew who had caused it. They were playing a joke on me.
Funny.
Well, anyway, then we saw the spaceship. And then one day I was coming home And I'd gone to get a movie, and Barbara had stayed here to cook or something. And I looked behind me, and there was this green car following me when I got off of the highway onto 2664, and it seemed ominous, and it was freaking me out, and I didn't know why, but it was. And then all of a sudden, the car's driving like this, and I'm watching it. It's driving behind me, and it goes, and I can see the whole underside of the car, and it goes, and it's and it falls over onto the side of the road. And I'm going, what the hell? That's not possible. I'm going home. And I left. I went home, and and Barbara goes, what took you so long? And I said, I don't know, but let me tell you what happened. And I told her about that, and she said, did you call anybody? I said, no. She said, well, what if they were hurt? And I said, I don't know. And she said, go check. And if you need to, you call. So I went back up there. There was no car, but there were all these pine trees that had been about 12 foot tall, saplings that were bowed over right where that had happened. They were bowed over. And, but now the car would have crushed them. But a spaceship, which was landing on whatever they land on and was not totally touching the ground with its body, could have bowed those ships over. But I didn't think about that. Also, we live 30 minutes out of town. Those people would have had to walk 10 minutes to the nearest phone. They would have had to call town for a wrecker. The wrecker would have had to gotten their stuff together and driven out here. It would have taken at least an hour for a wrecker to get here, at least. And then they would have to turn the car over, drag it out of there, and haul it off. None of that happened. And I asked the next day at the grocery store, the little corner grocery store that's here where I live at the end of that road, I asked them if somebody had an accident. And they said, no, not that we've heard of. And believe me, they heard everything that happened around here, because everybody told them everything and they could tell you everything. So that was just a mystery because I didn't know about the aliens at that time.
What happened with I think you've got a story regarding the paper route.
Yes, that's another thing that happened out here. That was after I graduated from college. I had this job lined up to be a master printer in Austin at a gallery for this guy named Sargent. I've never heard of him again. And I would call periodically to make sure everything was okay, to find out any updates. Well, I passed up even trying to get the student assistantship that they had for graduates. And I might have gotten it because I was a good art student. I was solid A's. And somebody else got it. Then I'm waiting for this job and I haven't heard from him for a while. So I call and a strange voice answers the phone. It turns out to be the landlord who's there cleaning up because Sargent hadn't paid his rent in 3 months and he had left town in the middle of the night and taken everything with him. And he didn't know where he was or anything. So my job was gone. Well, I became slightly depressed. We looked in the paper and we found a job doing a paper route. And it was at night for the Dallas Morning News. You delivered it at night so it would be there when they woke up in the morning. And it was from like 11 o'clock, supposedly from 11 o'clock to 2 or 3 o'clock. But when we did it, it took a lot longer than that. We had this Volkswagen and it was supposed to be a couple hundred miles or 100 miles is what she told us. And she said, if you don't finish the week, you don't get paid. I said, okay. So obviously a lot of people took that job for a day or two and quit. Well, we got in the car and we got there, we got the papers, and we did the route. And on the way home, I think I've got this right. On the way home, the steering wheel started jerking from side to side. My wife was driving. No, no, the wheels started squealing first. So the next morning I got up and I took the car to the Volkswagen place, the guy that worked on Volkswagens. He took the wheels off and he looked and he said, "There's nothing there." He said maybe a rock got in it and that would make it squeal, but there's nothing there. So next night we got there and we got our papers, and it had taken us a lot. It had taken like 5 hours the night before. So we got them and we started the paper route and we got into town. And that's when the steering wheel started, the front wheels actually started going, and Barbara was having a hard time holding the car straight. And it just got worse as the night went on, but we were trying to finish the job. And about midnight, so we've been doing it for 2 hours. About midnight, I said, "This is tearing up the car. It's more miles than we've got. Our car will be gone in 6 months because it's an old car anyway. Let's quit." She said, "Okay." So we drove over to that woman's house and she said, "Well, you don't get paid." And we said, "That's fine." And we unloaded all the newspapers and we left. And the steering wheel, I can't remember whether it stopped doing that or not, but it doesn't matter. It had been doing it. Well, the next day I felt really depressed and I felt like I was a total failure. And I thought my wife would be better off if I were dead. And then at least she could just start all over again. And so I thought, I'm just going to kill myself tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to go out in the woods and blow my brains out. So no, I didn't think that yet. We went to bed and I had this weird dream. We drove all over Nacogdoches, all over. We drove the paper route, and we ended up a house on Highway 21 where a friend of ours lived. And she and my friend, they went and sat in a car. We all did. But in my dream, we all sat at a picnic table. And then I had to go in the backyard. She said, when we woke up, I told her I had this weird dream. I know I'm jumping around a lot. And she said, "I did too." I said, "What was it?" She said, "You tell me yours first." So I did. And then that's when she said, "Well, when you were at the picnic table with us, we were all in the car, the old car. And when you wanted to go in the backyard, we stayed and we crawled under the car because we were afraid that the landlord was coming. And we knew he was going to be coming in the backyard where you were. And I was real worried about you. So I go in the backyard and there's a chain link fence there and he doesn't have one. And there was this wooden cabinet on the ground on the other side of the fence. And I'm looking at it and there's a little, I did want to kill myself. I forgot. There's this little head. And I looked at it and suddenly it springs up into a person with a scraggly beard and he looked real scary, but he didn't act real scary. And he said, "Don't hurt yourself. We have jobs for you." Actually, he said, "We have schools for you." And then he sucked up into this, he was a crystal skull, although I'd never heard of him and never seen one. And he shot off, shoom, and was gone. And that's when I woke up and talked to her. Well, I had been going to go out and kill myself, but I decided I wasn't going to. Now, and this is the part I missed up. The night before, there was this wooden glass cabinet, like in stores, at the side of our bed. And these little men that looked a lot like bell jars. They were about this big. They looked sort of like soldiers. They kept popping up, and they would pop up and go, "He's coming," and then another one, and another one, and sometimes there would be three or four, and so that's what the he was what was coming. The one I saw the next day, and so we go to this metaphysical bookstore we had started going to, and the woman that ran it said that two of her friends were coming by, that they were a little younger than us, we'd probably like them. Well, they come in and they tell me, we tell them about the no job situation. And he goes, "Well, they're hiring janitors at the college. So go to the college and apply for a job because they're still doing it today." He said, "In fact, you should go do it." So I went there and I applied, and I had done janitor work before. And he said, "Okay, you're hired." And he took me to this other guy in another room who had these two boards that you could stick, these plastic, you could type things out on these strips of plastic and stick them to the board. And he stuck me in one building, and then a woman who'd obviously just been hired in another building. He stood back and he crossed his arms across his chest and looked at him, and then he switched them. So that put me in the education building where I had just got my teaching certificate. And I was supposed to have a job teaching art where I had done my student teaching. But the woman, uh, an English teacher, decided she wanted to switch. She wanted to teach art, and they always give it in house first. So she got the job, and I had nothing. That's when I found the job working in Austin. Well, anyway, my major professor came into the room I was working in. He goes, "What are you doing here?" So I told him what had happened. He goes, "Well, I'm going to find you a job." He said, "Where do you want to work?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to work in East Texas. I'd like to work close to Nacogdoches or in Nacogdoches." He said, "Okay, I'll get you a job." A year later, a year later, he comes into the room where I'm working. He goes, "Come to my office." So I follow him into his office, and he said, "I've found you two jobs. They're both in they're both in Livingston. One of them is remedial reading and art, and the other one is accelerated English that will lead to an art job later." Oh, with one class of art. And I thought about it. I was never that really good at grammar or spelling or anything like that. And I want the remedial job. And he said, "Okay, you go tell them you got it. They'll give you whichever one you want." And so they had jobs for me. So the next day they had me set up for an interview, and I went. The guy loved me, gave me the job, and I worked there 2 years.
Amazing synchronicities.
Yeah, it's odd since they said they had schools for me, and they
Yeah.
didn't say a school, they said schools. Well, another thing though, this psychic I went to, we went to this psychic, she charges us $1, and she was pretty old. She was really accurate, amazingly accurate. And she said that I was going to get a job offer. And she said, "Well, actually, you're going to get two job offers." I said, "Two job offers?" And she said, "Yes." "What are they?" She said, "I don't know, but they're directly opposite of each other." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, they're directly opposite on the map, and something else about them is directly opposite." Well, these two schools were directly opposite of each other on a big street, way about 3 or 4 miles apart from each other. And then one was accelerated and one was remedial. So they were opposite in two different ways. I was going through a rough period at work. I didn't like working there. My wife and I were divorced. And I didn't admit it to myself, but I wanted to die. But I didn't want to kill myself. So I decided to do this experiment where to see if you could somehow leave without dying, leave your body. Maybe there was a door. Maybe death was just an alternate reality. And I called myself a necronaut as an explorer to find out about this. Fancy name. But anyway, one night, this happened before the incident in the restaurant, but it was so similar. I got into bed and I started meditating. Oh, the day before, in my astrology chart, which I looked up on the computer every day, it said that I might be given a chance to have a near-death experience. And I thought, that's really weird. That transit has never, ever come up again. They always come up at least once or twice, at least once a year, never again. And later I thought, they put that in there. Well, I go into the bedroom to lay down to meditate, and I use the same tapes that I'd use later. And this voice in my head goes, "You're going to be given the opportunity to die." And I thought, what the, what? Why would I think something like that? That's just really weird. Okay, so I get in bed. Now, it's too bad I didn't remember that. I get in bed, and I had forgotten that it said that. So I get into a deep meditation state, and suddenly I can't tell if I'm breathing. I can't tell my heart is beating. I can't see the phosphenes in my eyes. I have no contact with my body, and I'm in this huge black space. And next to me is like this wall of light. And I have this feeling, and I feel really small. I feel, oh, I, I felt everything leave me as I was going into this state. I felt all of my hangups, all of my problems that happened to me as a child, anything that caused me pain, was just going away, leaving. I was beginning to become empty. And I felt like I was the size of the end of an ink pen, the little bitty ball. So it was like a review of my life, but I didn't realize that. Then there was this wall of light, and I thought, I think I could move into that. And then I'm going, what if I can't get out? Huh, I'm 12 miles from town. If I get out of this and I'm having a heart attack or something, there's no way anybody could save me. Now, of course, I should be going later. I'm going, why didn't you remember that you actually wanted to die? So obviously, I really didn't want to. But I went, I'm not going to go. And this voice go, and it turns out it was the mantis's voice. It says, huh, you said you wanted this. And now that I've gone to the trouble to get it for you, you're not going to go. And the wall turned into a sphere, and it shrank 3 times. And each time I could see, and it was like a mirror that didn't reflect anything. And then it was gone, and I was wide awake. And for years, I kicked myself for not going. And this man who was a physicist became my teacher, or whatever you want to call it, mentor. He said, "No, you did the right thing." He said, "You wouldn't have come back, and you had work to finish." He said, "If you'd have gone across, it would have been so pleasant and so happy that you would have just stayed."
I think you've got implants. Am I correct?
Yes. Well, I went to a few meetings in Houston with um, Gerald Sims's group, HUFON, HUFON, Houston UFO Network, not associated with MUFON, and there I was going to look at any marks or anything we had. So I had pictures of my marks, and then I have these 3 weird little indentions on my leg that are like about the size of this pin, the end of it, and they look like something had been scooped out, the skin. And in fact, they're called scoop marks. And what they believe is they scoop out a part of skin and they would wrap it around an early implant to keep the body from rejecting it, because the body would think it was just a glob of skin in there. And they think that it's done with a laser. Well, I had a friend who had the same mark on her arm that had just appeared overnight, and I knew she was an abductee. And it had a ring of blood dried right around the edge. It was like a perfect red line, as if someone had drawn it with an ink pen right below the first layer of skin. So obviously they'd scooped something out, and it had frozen that blood instead of letting it flow. It had cooked it. And I'd never seen a fresh one. I don't know. I've got a picture of it somewhere, but I didn't find it. So I have 3 of those on my left leg. And at first I thought I only had 2, but one day I had the intelligence to look on the other side of my leg, and there it was.
Okay.
Now, I've been able to tell from the things that have happened that they know what I see, they know what I hear, and they know what I think, because they've saved me sometimes in a split second. Although now I know they can see the future too. It wasn't the split second, but it seemed like it. Maybe they knew and they were just nearby. Like they saved me in the 80s, 90s, 90s. Yeah, around 2007 or 2008, I was singing in a country band, and I sang with this one guy. I'd sing 3 songs that he could rest his voice, and I was getting ready to walk off the stage. Now I always walked off the side and stepped off the steps. This time I felt cocky, and I was going to jump off the front of the stage. Of course, it's only like 1 or 2 foot tall on the concrete floor. Well, as I got to the edge of it and was about to take my last step, I realized that my left foot was caught under a bundle of cables that go to speakers and stuff, and that I wasn't going to jump off this stage. I was going to fall off the stage and hit my head. At that point, my foot that was caught pushed me once again, like the car accident. I couldn't move. My foot pushed me up and caused me to spin around where I was facing the stage, and I sat down on the floor. I didn't move backwards. I didn't dip. My knees didn't bend. And the whole audience, there was about 100 people in there. It was just like total silence. And the musician said, "It's all right, folks. We practiced that." And then they went back to talking. So I got home and I practiced jumping backwards like that. Every time I almost fell, I had to catch myself. So I had actually been sat down on the floor by an outside force and twirled around by an outside force.
Let's get into the marks that you sent me, all the photos. Let me see. You've got one. Let's talk about the one that we both have, really, the triangle mark.
I woke up one morning and it was there. Now, I had heard about triangle marks and I'd wondered why I had never had one. And I did figure out later, when I saw some other people's triangular marks, they weren't perfect. Like the one that you got a picture of, it's really close to a perfect triangle. And usually there's a side of it would be broken free, you know, a little indentation or something. And I'd had those before, but this one was a perfect mark, and I photographed it. I had been having trouble photographing things. It just was like I had this thing against photographing it. Well, I started and I fought through that over a couple of months, and I was able to do it. And I did it fine with this. But I don't know
When,
how it got there. It was there one day, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later, it was gone.
because it's, yeah, it looks bloody a bit. So I'm not sure what he did to it.
It was not scraped skin. Uh, in fact, when I looked at it, it looked like it originated from three punctures at the 3 points of the triangle, and somehow they did something inward, and it's pretty solid.
When well, I didn't know anything about ETs growing up, again, Northern Canada. And so I had this marking just above my left knee, which to me, I've had this since the age of, as long as I can remember. So 2.5 and up, really. And, being that tall, and, you do have skinny, small legs, so, no body hair whatsoever, and, silky smooth skin. So I felt it strange that I had this sort of marking just above the left knee that looked to me like a stone that was under the skin. But, again, this is using a child's mentality. If there was a stone under the skin, your body would try to push it out with pus and whatever. But mine
Right.
was always there, and it's not like it's not a birthmark. It's not like a brown spot or anything. And when you look at it, it's really a triangle. And I've had like visitors as a kid. I don't remember seeing them, but I do remember telling my mother that there were people in my bedroom at night. And I was so afraid looking in the dark that I'd sleep with my entire belly against the wall. And this happened, and I slept
Wow.
like that for years and years and years and years. Afraid of the under the bed, afraid of the closet, afraid of the dark, and whatever. And so I had this marking all my life. And as soon as I saw yours, I was amazed because I thought I was the only one. I was aware of divots skin samples taken above the knee on certain abductees, but mine, I don't have that normal scoop indentation, let's say, that some might have, but I've had that marking since forever. And when I saw yours, it looked almost identical. So I was amazed that it could be related.
That's cool.
Um, Now there's an interesting story with a soon-to-be girlfriend called Sam.
Yes, and the telephone.
Yeah. Do you want to get into that? Yeah.
Yes, she had a phone, and I had a phone too, a cell phone, but it was just a flip phone. It was just a regular little phone. It didn't even play music. All you did was talk on it, and I don't think that at that time they took pictures. I can't remember for sure. It might have taken pictures, but all did was that. We were out on the porch. She was getting ready to leave, saying she got a text, and she opened it up, read the text, and then she closed it. And as she closed it, now her name was not Sam, but that was my nickname for her. I gave it to her. So it was a private name. Well, she closed the phone and it goes, Sam. And it sounded like a computer generated voice in a phone that has no computer generated voices. It was not a computer phone, it was just a phone. And she freezes and she looks at me and she goes, Did you hear that? And I said, Yeah, I heard it. She goes, Thank God. I said, You heard it too? And she goes, Yeah. So the next day, it did the same thing with her in a grocery store. And then it never did it again. And I had told her she was an abductee. And she didn't want to believe it. She did believe it, but she didn't want to. Well, she didn't have any choice after that. We knew what had done it. Nothing could do that. You want me
Okay.
to tell you about the UFO I saw? The
Yeah,
one you were
let's talk
just
about the
talking about?
UFO that looks like a cigar, but yeah, it's a bit elongated.
This was a tube. I was working on my house, and there was one corner of the house that I could not get in the front of because of an old cast iron bathtub that's in the way. You can't get a ladder over it. So I had to get behind it and do the work by feel and put it, caulk it, and paint it just by feeling. So I got down and I'd gotten out early in the morning to do this. I got down after I did all the work, and I stood there and I was looking up to see if it looked right. And this voice in my head said, "Look up." And I looked further up, and there in the sky was this huge, had to be over 100 feet long, white tube, and it was like a third of it, and then a smaller area, and then big, the regular size like the first. So, and above that was this swirling like heat, looks like coming off the road, except this was swirling around in a tight pattern above that, and it was moving very slowly. And the sky was beautiful blue. It looked like a picture out of National Geographic. And I reached around to get my phone, and I didn't have it. And I go, I know are not going to be here when I get back, but I hope you are. I'm going to go get my phone. So I stood there and watched it just a few more minutes. And then I ran in the house and ran back, and it was gone. And it had been about 1,200 feet above my yard. It was just below the lowest hanging clouds.
Both of mine that came over my house were about 150 feet off the ground.
Wow, that's really good.
Egg-shaped, a bit like yours, but I don't call it, it's not really egg-shaped, more egg-shaped, but rounded, less elongated, but more rounded and orange-red in nature.
Wow.
Yeah, no sound, just glided.
No.
But yours, yeah, well, so I suspect yours was very big.
Yes, it was over 100 feet long. It was about the length of three large trailer houses. I drove down the road and I started looking at things, and I figured out the distance to it. When I was about 1,200 feet from the trailer house, I looked at it and figured out, and I could tell it was a long 45 or 50 foot long trailer house, and that it would take 3 or 4 of them to make up the ship I saw.
That's huge. In 2015, you were taken out of body.
Yes. That once again, there was a psychic involved. The psychic had told me, she did readings for me. She was in England, and she would send me an MP3 file, and she'd been right for 2 years in a row, 100%. I got this third one, and she said, "Now you may think this is weird, but you're one of them." And I go, "Oh, okay." Well, she's been right so far, so I can ignore this. Well, the end of a year passed, and she had been so completely right about everything, and I went, maybe there's something to this. I'm going to try and find out. So I started meditating, and I started thinking about how I never felt like I belonged on earth. I never felt like I was part of my family. I didn't like to be around people all that much. I like people, but I like them over there and me over here. And a bunch of other things like that. And I started feeling, I was actually, first off, I convinced myself intellectually that what she was saying was true. And then emotionally, I started feeling it. And I went, yes, I am an alien. And suddenly, it felt like two fingers reached into the back of my head and reached up into my brain and grabbed me, what's really me, and pulled it out. And then my body was gone, and I was just in blackness again. No breathing, no heartbeat, no nothing. My body didn't feel like it was near me at all, anywhere. And my house was gone. Everything was gone. And I saw this huge grid of light that, and there were these three men made out of light, three beings made out of light. And they were sitting in thrones. Well, right before I saw them, this voice said, "The Council of Three." And then there they were on that grid against it. And I think that was just to give me a point of reference. And one of them said, it was like the one in the middle was talking or thinking for all of them. And he said, "We're very proud of you. We've been waiting for you to figure this out." And then this loud noise that sounded a lot like a telephone dial-up system for a computer started going in my head, or not my head, and all these information started flowing in to me, and then I was awake, and it was all over with, and I couldn't remember much of anything except I remember that it said, "Your debt is the chains of your slavery." And I immediately set to work getting out of debt. Because when it said that, "Your debt is the chains of your slavery," but yeah, that's exactly right. If I didn't have a debt, I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I did without a lot of things and made double payments, triple payments. I got the debt down to zero. Now I do use a credit card, but I pay it off every month, or actually I'll pay it off every week. So anyway, um, there was other stuff, and slowly I've remembered it. Some of it has come to me, and I know that I am a light being, and that I was sent here. I volunteered to come here, and I've probably been to Earth twice before, and that was Atlantis and Lemuria, and that's what the psychic told me too. And she said I was really shocked being here this time because it's not the same at all. I mean, even the animals were friendly towards each other at one of those points in time. And it used to be interesting because if anybody messed with me, I thought, "You better not mess with me, man, because you're going to pay for it." Because it was like if anybody did me wrong, something happened to them. And in fact, one good, I had a trailer house, my wife and I did, and we sold it to this guy. And then he wanted me to do this carpentry work as part of, without any extra pay. And so I went ahead and did it because he'd already bought the house and given me my money. He wanted me to remove a wall out of it. So I removed the wall. And then he like kept letting my cat, or leaving the door open so my cat could get out. And it was a house cat. And I asked him not to do that. And he told me to not bother him, or he would kick my ass. And he was a big football player. And I was 110 pounds. So I still kept an eye on my cat, but he didn't do that. But he left. I finished the job, and he came and they got the trailer house. I was already moved into this house. I'd already bought this house. I was in this house. Anyway, I was in this house, or I was in the house on Douglas Road. I already had a house. It was all. It was just easier to just do it. Houston, and about 6 months later, I met this guy, and we started talking about this person who turns out to be that insurance salesman. And I talk about the trailer house. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, you know what happened?" I said, "No, what?" And he goes, "Well, when they were driving into Houston, this huge gust of wind came in and it hit that trailer, and the whole roof collapsed and destroyed it." I went, "Wow, that's interesting." So it's like I came here with no karma. And if anybody messed with me, they would they would pay with instant karma right off the bat. And I've heard lately that a lot of us were sent here to help in this time period. And one reason is we have no karma. And we're some of the things we do would help other people free themselves from their karma. Like if anybody did you wrong, just forget it. Forgive it. Let it go. It doesn't matter. Go on and go to something better. Dolores Cannon talks a lot about that.
Yeah. Some of my friends who are all abductees, contactees, that's the main message they're also getting from the ETs. Just let it go.
Around 84, 85, I went on a date with this woman, and we decided to go for a ride out in the country so we could talk a little bit. Well, we rode out this long road that I like, and she'd been on it before. And we topped this hill, and up in the sky is the moon in the atmosphere on fire. And we pass under it. And we both look at each other at the same time, and we both say, "Did you see that?" And we both did. So we turned the car around and we went back, and it was gone. Now, first off, you can't pass under the moon. It's always going to be way up there. It can't be in the atmosphere. It would be hitting the earth. So, and it was like covered with flames all around it tightly, not like the sun. So I took her to her house because we just didn't feel like talking much after that for some reason. I took her to her house, let her go, and then I stopped at a Dairy Queen on the way home. And as I walked into the Dairy Queen, they had the radio on. They played radio then instead of canned music, and it was the news. And so I heard the last tail end of this newsman saying, "And something strange was seen over the sky in Nacogdoches this evening." That's all he said. That's all I heard. I don't know what he said before that, but that was strange. And I have heard of one other person seeing the moon in the sky.
Now, let's get into your book. What was the reason that you wanted to get this thing out, to get your story out?
Well, first off, I wrote this long outline, but it was just everything that happened to me because I had all these things that people said were angels, God, a guardian angel. And as I went through it, I realized all these things were alien. The 9 times my life was saved, everything we talked about. And I had it all written out, and I thought I was going in some chat rooms, some support rooms on Facebook, and I thought this might help other people because they might have had similar experiences, or they might have had odd experiences, and this would help them understand why. And I've already got the outline, and I've always wanted to write a book, although actually I had already written my science fiction book, and I almost think like I was influenced to write that to show me that I could write a book. And I thought, well, I've got an outline. I didn't use an outline for that book. So I just started writing it out to see if that would be enough to be a book. And it was to help people and to help myself because I really thought about dates. I really would think about what had happened and let my mind float around it to see as much detail as I possibly could, things like that.
To end the interview, like, do you have another story to share, or perhaps a closing statement that you want to get out there?
Well, a lot of people are afraid of the aliens, and they're also disturbed that they are taken against their will. And some of them get hurt. Some people get hurt, but a lot don't get hurt. They're just afraid because these aliens look so weird because they have dark eyes and because they take them against their will and they don't think that's fair. And they're afraid they just treat us like lab animals. When I let go of that fear, and I've known other people that when they let go of the fear, on the other side of that, there started being benefits like intuition increasing, things that would come to you in meditation. Some things I know they showed me and told me to do without me realizing it because they can talk in my head. And I just became more calm too. So I wouldn't get all upset because they're taking you against your will. A lot of the people that are abducted are actually aliens themselves. and are sent here to help. But like they said, when the ones that no, the psychic said they were proud of me because I had not succumbed to money and materiality. And so many of the beings that were sent when I came in the 1940s and 50s, I came in the 1950s, became bankers, Wall Street, and just totally missed the mark completely.
So you're on the path. You've been doing good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Byron, for coming on. It's been fun. You've got an amazing story. We've only skimmed it, really. So I'm hoping that those who've enjoyed your story today could purchase it on Amazon. And because you sent me a resume of your entire story and this whole thing would have lasted easily 3 hours. So thanks for agreeing to come on and sharing with us all your photos and drawings and all that. So it's been fun. So thank you a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
And to those watching today's interview, hope you enjoyed it. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.